Do you need to add some epic percussion to your tracks? Let's talk about Saga by Red Room Audio. What's up guys, this is Melin, music composer for the screen, helping you to build a music business that supports your family. Today we're talking about Saga, Acoustic Trailer Percussion by Red Room Audio, and how you can use it to beef up the intensity of your music. If you joined me a few weeks ago when we did a review of Palette Symphonic Sketchpad, then you'll know that Red Room Audio pulls no punches when they put quality into their libraries. Saga Acoustic Trailer Percussion is really an exceptional library, mainly because of the acoustic part of it. Unlike some of the other epic action libraries out there, maybe like Heavyosity's Damage, which really focuses more on the sound design layering of trailer type sounds, what I love about Saga is it really focuses on the organic sounds that you can get inside of an orchestral hall. So we're gonna be focusing on orchestral ensembles mixed with world ensembles. Saga contains everything you need in an epic library, including orchestral and world drum ensembles, cymbals and gongs, oil drums, world solo drums, anvils and destroyed metals, and even field recordings, including battle gear, tools, machinery, metal doors, and a bunch of other weird stuff that is super useful in your music. Saga is available for full version Contact 5 or later, and even though it comes in a small package of 10 patches, every single one of these patches is extremely usable and highly valuable. Let's take a look at the interface and see what's inside. So right off the bat, when we take a look at the interface of Saga, you'll notice that there is this little button in the bottom left corner that allows us to change the size of this. Not a lot of Contact patches have this feature, but I love that this is what's called a widescreen patch. So down here, if we click this little button and then the exclamation point way up here in the top right corner, we can shrink it down to a normal Contact patch size, or if we want to return it back to normal, we can do the exact same process. Click the button and then go back up to the exclamation point. So this is helpful if you have a smaller screen, you can better adjust. So this interface is not particularly large, but I love how much control we have with basic things such as the panning, the width, the tuning, and then even the blending of the microphones. So what really sets this library apart from other percussion ensembles is every single patch is pretty loaded up. So you'll notice that if I even just click on the different colors within the patch, at the lowest we have large drum ensemble, snare ensemble, moving all the way up, just different types of instruments. We have low tom ensemble, high toms, and this is all still just one patch. This is all part of the very first patch, orchestral ensembles. So I am not one that would particularly love using the effects, but if you don't have a really solid reverb plugin, or if you don't have a great EQ or some of these other guys here, then that is a great place to start adding those on. But my preference is just to play everything straight out of the box. That way we can make as organic music as possible. And then of course, at the end, we can add some post effects as needed. So right off the bat, you'll notice that with the orchestral ensemble, I find that the combo of the toms already gives us a huge palette of what I like to call the frequency spectrum. So we have low, mids, and highs all baked into one patch. So I'm a big fan of just pulling up a patch and playing, and based on the different notes I play, I want to be able to represent a bunch of different frequencies. So for example, I want to be able to play low drums at the same time as the high drums. And I love that if I just play around, not really thinking too much, I can make a really cool beat. Moving on to world ensembles, this is a really cool patch, and I would probably buy this library just for this patch. As simple as that sounds, I love the simplicity of having taiko ensemble from Japan all the way to frame drums from Africa, the surdos from Brazil, hand drums from all around the world, and the tupan, and just a bunch of different drums here that you usually have to go get separate patches from a bunch of different companies, combine them together to make something that even resembles this. So right at our fingertips, we have so much power, and I love how this is a patch I'm going to be using so much in my music because it represents a ton of world instruments, and it has the low, mid, and high frequencies all at the same time. Moving on, we have a world soloist patch. This one, very similar to the world ensembles, but they're just solo instruments. So it's just one person playing a taiko, one person playing a sordo, frame drum, etc. So this is really useful if you want to help build intensity throughout a track. You might start really small. So this is more for like that indie type sound where maybe you're trying to represent a certain location of the world and you just want a little bit of taiko or something like that. And then perhaps from there you build into the big bombastic world ensemble music. Next up we have oil drums. This is a really cool addition to the mix because oil drums have this really metallic sound, but they're also very large. So in this patch, we have 3 different oil drums. Super usable. And that metallic sound can really be layered well as a high frequency on top of some of those lower big drums to create a super dramatic sound. Next up, we have cymbals. Now, traditionally, cymbals within an orchestral context, they're super important. But what's interesting here is we have 3 different size cymbals. We have the 20-inch cymbal, nice and big and fat. We have the 18-inch cymbal, and then the really tiny one, the 16-inch. So what's really cool about this is usually within orchestral music, when you get a cymbal patch, they're only the huge ones. And what I like here is we can actually hear the little rolls of the mallets on the cymbal. And I think it's a really cool addition. So depending on the size of your ensemble, you can actually mix and match these. And they have shorts and longs for all of these. So super usable. Next up, we have gongs. Now gongs really cover both tam-tams and gong families. So gongs are unpitched and tam-tams are pitched. So what that means is if I start playing, a lot of these will be effects that you expect to hear in like Chinese or just Asian music. But if we start layering that with low gongs, there's a lot of cool options here. And so I would see myself really using these as ambience and effects just to help with transitions, especially if you're doing a film that has a lot of Asian influences. You might want to use this as a scenes transition, or in a huge epic context, you might want to get a huge gong going to help transition into a new section. Next up, we have anvils. Now, anvils are they're a piece of metal that you're whacking with some kind of stick. And what's really cool about anvils is they instantly give a lot of intensity, like a battle track. And so you don't want to use them in every context, but they sound like this. But we also have some scrapes and some other effects in the higher. So I love how deeply sampled each of these instruments is. It's not just the hits, it's also the scrapes and the bowings of these instruments. That way you can get a lot of sound design out of these too, even though they are organic acoustic instruments. Next we have metal sheets. These are really interesting because it's just a giant sheet that the performers just threw, or they would whack it with something. So there's a lot of cool different sounds you can get. So make sure you play through each of the notes here. So I could see myself using this either as an ambience in the background to get some kind of squeals, to kind of maybe create some horror acoustic music that way, or you can use it to really bang and create a lot of intensity. So that will really add a lot of intensity to your music. Next up is silo booms. Now, these are huge sounds that you really need to tame in your music. If you're gonna use it just by itself to create a big thud, that's fine. They sound like this. So a huge sound like this, if you are going to use it in an epic trailer type soundscape, you do need to tame it down with an EQ just to make sure that it's not taking up all of the headroom, all of the space within your mix. So use it very sparingly, perhaps every 8 bars or 4 bars, just to have a good, nice thud at the bottom of your mix. Super cool sound to make something sound epic. Last but not least, we have various metals. You notice how on the Contact keyboard, there's a ton of different colors represented, and each one represents a different family of items or instruments. So at the bottom here, we have small metals, just a bunch of random sounds. We have containers. We have different tools. A lot of cool sounds that we can layer. We have pipes. And globes, doors, large metals. So it might seem random just to have a bunch of metals, but what I have found in writing music for a long time is anytime you want something to sound huge, really epic, you really do need to layer up your low, mids, and highs. So it's not enough to have the big booms and the whacks of the drums. It's also really nice to have on the high end, maybe not a ton of them, but to layer with some intensity. Just to have some kind of rhythm that's happening at that higher end. It's going to allow for the whole context to sound absolutely massive. Now that we've heard a small sample of every patch represented by Saga, let's actually write a piece of music and see what it sounds like in context. Here we are within a Cubase session where I have composed about a 1-minute track using standard epic orchestral instruments. So I have a big horn line doubled with trumpets, violins, and some high woodwinds. And then we have some ostinatos in the background using strings, winds, and brass. So we're going to take this track, and on top of it, I'm going to add some Saga acoustic trailer percussion to help beef it up and make it really epic and really intense. So let's listen to the bass track all by itself. Here's what it sounds like. So you'll notice that this track already has a lot of intensity going on. It obviously already sounds epic. We have our 4 repeating chords, and essentially we're starting with a slower rhythm of 8th notes, chugga, 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 chugga. And then at the second half, we basically do a double time where it's all 16th notes, chugga, 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 chugga. And even as intense as it is musically and harmonically, it's missing something. And so obviously we have this need and this desire for percussion to help fill in the gap. So you certainly could use a different library to help add a lot of the intensity that you'd expect from like trailer music, of the big sound design percussion, the big whooshes and the big swooshes and the huge brahms and all those types of things. And that's certainly one way that you could go with this. But I think there's another sector of the market of music that we need something a little bit more tame, something that's still epic, but really fits within, as the title of the plugin is called, Acoustic Trailer. And so that's what we're gonna do here today. Let me show you some of the percussion that I added on top of this to keep the epic feel, but still keep within the realm of realism. These are all sounds that you can record in an orchestral hall to get the same effect. So let's dive in. The first instrument I decided to add here were some snare drums. So you notice how I took the very first patch here, I duplicated it so that I could have more control over the snares in the first track and then toms in the second track. I wanted them at 2 different volume levels, and so I decided to just split them. So this first instrument here, the snares, let's open that up. Mostly in the second half of the track, when the octaves jump up in the melody, I wanted to make sure that we give a little bit more intensity to that with some snare rolls. Here's what it sounds like by itself. And you add that into the whole ensemble. So that really helps add energy. However, in the first half of the track, I wanted to add some toms to really give energy in the lower intensity section. That way we have somewhere to build. So I'm a big fan of taking multiple areas of the frequency spectrum, so high, mids, and lows, and stacking them on top of each other. And percussion is the best place to do that because it allows us to have the depth with the lows, and then some of the kind of strikes and the more intensity type instruments in the upper half of the spectrum. So that's why I usually in my ensemble, notice how I start pretty low with some of these thicker ensembles, and then as we get to the more intense section, I add more of the high register as we go. So the toms here sound like this by themselves. Pretty standard stuff, but I intentionally tried to keep the beat on the syncopation. I feel like epic music, and we use these big acoustic trailer drums, it's good to help get some kind of beat that's not strict on the beat 4/4 time, but rather da, 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 da. So you add those to the ensemble, sounds like this. The next element that I added to add a little bit more intensity and really just to double the toms from the beginning is the world ensemble track. And for this, I didn't really care what instruments I played. I just try to choose anything that has a nice low register mixed with the high register. So if you play it by itself, get some of those stick whacks at the top, but also some of the low thuds on the bottom. And when you layer that in with everything, sounds like this. Sounds really cool in my ears. The last item here for the beginning is to add some of these silo booms. I really like these because they're these huge low thuds. The only danger though is if you play them all by themselves, they take up way too much room in this orchestral context. Here's what this sounds like by itself. You can hear some of those rattles in the background. Cool sound. However, I felt the need to put an EQ on it. So I just put a Pro Q from FabFilter. Notice how I'm only using that low range. I'm not really getting into the high range. So when it's activated, it sounds like this. You can hear how it's not shimmery anymore. It really just has a very dedicated pocket that it fits within the track. So you put that in with the others. It sounds like this. And then of course we have to add something in the second half to add more intensity. And so this is where the metal sheets really come in handy. When we start adding really any sound from metals will help give it some more energy and intensity. So I just chose some of the high sounds, sound like this. You put that together with the others. We have an incredible amount of acoustic intensity. And then the last item here is to add some cymbals.
really love these cymbals. They really add so much warmth and depth to the ensemble. And so I just chose the 2 moments that I felt like cymbals, a really long cymbal swell would help. And that's this transition moment to the upper octaves, the second half, and then the very end. So you add it in, it sounds like this. So I decided for this track not to use the World Soloists or the oil drums because I feel like those are very particular sounds that they're not as orchestral and it doesn't really fit the large sound we're going for this context. I didn't want to use gongs because that kind of has an Eastern sound. The anvils is really for super intense music. Didn't quite want that. And then various metals. I probably could have found something to sneak in there, but I felt like the metal sheet really solved that goal there. And so if we listen to just the percussion, you'll notice how it's full, it's rich, it has the low, the middle, and the high range all represented at all times, but also has a very clear dynamic range where we start with a low intensity to a high intensity by building over time. That's really the trick here that we're trying to achieve. So here is the percussion track by itself. And so now let's put it all together. Let's listen to the full Saga acoustic trailer demo track using both an orchestral palette for the melodic and harmonic side of things, but with Saga for the percussive elements. Let's take a listen.
Thanks for watching, guys. If this video was helpful for you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this every Wednesday. If you're ready to add Saga to your tool belt today, take advantage of the 20% discount in the link below. That's exclusive to my channel just for watching this video here today. Your purchase supports my channel at no additional cost to you, so I hope that serves you well. I want to give a special thanks to T. Sonus and the rest of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for your financial gifts, which help support my channel here. If you'd like to take your music career to the next level, I hope you'll consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon, where you get one-on-one exclusive access to me through early access videos, a ton of free downloads, and an exclusive Discord community, a ton of other stuff that we're adding every single month. So make sure you jump in there, link in the description below. Until next week, check out more of my plugin review videos right over here with this playlist, and I'll see you next time.